retired metalhead weatherman here. Hopefully you guys are doing well. So in this one, we're actually going to be talking about the severe weather threat existing into the middle of this week or upcoming week. So one thing to note here is nothing really significant is expected as of right now. I mainly mentioned the 7th and the 8th. Between really the 7th and the 11th, there are all opportunities for severe weather to unfold, but the 7th and the 8th stood out to me, but there's still a lot of questions with that. So hence why we have a marginal risk on the 7th, and there's no day 4 through 8 slight risk of any kind. I pretty much would expect the 8th, when it gets into day 3, to start out as maybe a marginal risk, but maybe pending an upgrade depending on parameters, which is a similar deal as to what's going on with this. There could be a chance that this gets upgraded to slight risk, but it's not a high chance. It is a slight chance. See what I did there? Sorry if the humor was lame. But anyway, so basically the general synopsis is this. Isolated, strong to severe thunderstorms are possible pretty much from Austin to Corpus Christi and all the way up towards Houston, a little bit north of there, right towards the Texas-Louisiana line, especially towards the Gulf Coast. There's a lack of cape here, which is going to always be a limiting factor for storm coverage, but there is a pretty sufficient amount of shear, and that's going to be a key component in keeping storms going. But again, the cape is going to be the biggest problem here. When we look at the vorticity, it doesn't really start to become more stout system until after it passes over the region. Set this in motion here. Try to make sure I keep that time right there. Here's our storm system. Not the most impressive. It's positively tilted, so it's kind of struggling at this point. It starts to get its act together a little bit more as we watch this get into late Tuesday night, but honestly, the Euro has this lagging behind just a little bit. And as a result, we don't really get much action until maybe the overnight hours. This is about 6 p.m. Central Standard, I would say. And then as we roll this forward, that's when we start to see some activity pop up here, especially over towards this region. But this region looks pretty quiet still. But if we were to go ahead and take a look at a sounding, we do get marginal severe here. So if a storm were to pop up in this region, there is some potential for it to blossom here. There's a decent hordeograph here. Not the strongest storm helicity that I've ever seen. 159 meters squared per second squared. There is an indicator for some classic supercell potential, but for the most part, I would expect storms of the severe variety to be on the line, to be along the front here in the form of a line. Also, another thing to note here is look at how low that mixed layer cape is, 309 joules per kilogram. Not a lot to work with there. The K or theta index is pretty high though. It's at 33. So if this storm can get its act together early on, there is potential for this to really develop into something maybe a little bit more significant. You can't really you can't put all your hopes into the cape values, and there's other parameters that can overcome that basically. So it's something that we have to keep an eye on. And again, cape values can often jump up within the next run, so we have to keep a close eye on this. This is still 63 hours out, so there's a lot of room for this to change. We still have another 2 days to go. So we move this forward, and I think Wednesday is going to be a day of greater interest. We move this over towards, I would say, early afternoon. Probably, I would say, 2 p.m. Right, this would probably be right along the front here, and this is where we can probably expect some storms to develop. I would say right around here, just out ahead of it, is where we can expect increased potential here for severe. Decent low-level helicity. Again, not the most impressive. Cape isn't very impressive. And this is starting to go into a little bit more of a linear mode, but there could be a couple of embedded supercells here. This is over towards western Louisiana, or southwestern Louisiana, I should say. So again, not high confidence that we'll get any severe outbreak of any kind, but a couple of big storms are possible. As we watch this roll forward here, our warm sector is still pretty limited. I would say maybe towards southern Alabama, there could be some potential existent for maybe a severe storm. It's not really showing up on here right now, but given how the forcing looks, it's kind of questionable. Then on top of that, this is also in the overnight hours. So a lot of questions lie ahead as far as what will happen on Thursday and beyond. But this is a pretty stout storm system here. If we get any sort of additional warming across this region here into the overnight and early morning hours, we could be singing a different tune here. So definitely have to keep a close eye on things. Since we know that Tuesday and Wednesday seems to be the days of greatest interest, we're going to mainly focus on that from here on out. We're going to mainly start by looking at the dew points over towards Texas, because that was at one point a big question. And it looks like we will end up seeing sufficient dew points across the Texas coast and towards southern Texas, especially earlier in the day. It's kind of hard to keep the time frame because of how far south this is. But we'll roll this forward here. I'll kind of toggle back up here. This is heading into Monday afternoon and then into Tuesday. And we can see those values starting to increase. We're starting to get towards the 15 degrees Celsius range, which would be about 50 to 60 degrees, or closing in on 60 degrees. And then when we get into the blues, we're definitely in 60 degree territory. So we're looking at 17 degrees Celsius by the early morning hours on Wednesday. And I think that's when the severe potential will really start to pick up here. Also have to keep an eye on storms popping up around the Gulf Coast in particular. I think that's where our highest chance of supercells probably will exist. And then as we go on, there's going to be increased dew points across the Gulf Coast around Louisiana, parts of Mississippi on Wednesday evening. Do think a linear mode will exist, but there could be a couple of discrete cells that pop up around here. I don't really know if this will pop up in our storm modes particularly. As far as anything like the Euro is concerned, we'll have to kind of look towards the short range models, but we're not quite in range of that yet. So we might have to wait it out a day or two to see how things could really start to look here. So that's what we have going on there. Let's go ahead and take a look at the low level jet now, which is a key factor to a lot of this unfolding, because it even said in that synopsis that the low-level shear was going to be a key factor to a lot of this. So we got this set in place now. We're going to run this forward all the way up towards Tuesday evening. And really it isn't till I'd say late Tuesday evening and maybe more so into, I would say, the overnight hours where we start to see a decent bit of energy popping up here from the low-level jet. We're sitting at the bottom end of the spectrum, I'd say, too. Right now, we're seeing 20 to 30 knots around this region where we're expecting our greatest area of interest for severe. And this picks up as we get into morning hours on Wednesday. So I'm thinking this would be a linear mode, but a couple of discrete storms would be possible, especially further towards the south. That's the kind of setup we're looking like we're dealing with here. We're getting up to about 45 knots by about 5-6 a.m. across this region. And this picks up more as we get into the day Wednesday. I think the greatest wind shear is going to be a little bit too far to the north to be taken advantage of in regards to the severe aspect. And then as we roll this forward here, this becomes a monster with wind energy. So even across these areas where we aren't expecting severe weather, we can expect an increase in winds, because the low-level jet is usually indicative of a little bit more indicative of what may go on at the surface here. So I would expect Wednesday night into Thursday, maybe even Friday, to be blustery across this part of the eastern half of the country here. Out west, thought I'd cover you guys really quick. Mainly towards the northwest is where business is going to really be starting to pick up again. We kind of have the look of a cyclone. We kind of were looking at the hints of a cyclone starting to develop across that region. I'm going to cover that more so tomorrow as time goes on. But I am concerned as we get towards the middle of the month of maybe signs of a couple of big storm systems heading into that region. So let's go ahead and finally take a look at the precip map here. And we'll pretty much call it a wrap from this point. But simply put, the main thing I'm concerned about right now is more so severe weather across Texas. Try to soon scroll this down a little bit further. But as far as Monday and Tuesday is concerned, a little bit of activity towards the northwest here. And then, of course, once we get towards Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, a couple of showers and thunderstorms developing here, with the potential of a few going severe. But I think the main event really starts to unfold right about 5-6 o'clock across this region here. That's where I'm thinking that the highest likelihood exists for maybe a storm to potentially go even tornadic, possibly. It's hard to say right now. I'm going to actually see if I can go ahead and click a sounding. I don't know why that's not working right now. It went off. Well, anyway, jump back a bit. There we go. So right here on the Texas-Louisiana line here. Marginal severe threat, classic supercell look. Decent curve in the hordeograph here, so that's one thing to look out for again. So the main thing that we'll be looking for as time goes on is going to be the look of discrete cells out ahead of the main line, which will probably be somewhere back here. Or actually the front will be somewhere back here. Could also have multiple rounds of this too, so that's another thing to look out for. As we move this further on towards Wednesday afternoon and into Wednesday evening, we can start to see these storms coming from the Gulf onshore, and I think there could be a couple of supercells there. Could lean into a slight tornado threat there. And then after that, we watch this turn into a really messy line, and the warm sector becomes a little bit more limited. So mainly we're just going to be looking at rain across these regions at this point. But that's what we have going with the severe weather threat. We'll take a look further at what's to be expected out in the northeast tomorrow. Or northwest, I should say, excuse me. Anyway, it's the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, of course, definitely drop me a like. I always appreciate that. And if you haven't, hit the double click, like, and subscribe, of course. And then I will see you in the next video. This is it for now. This has been Metalhead Weatherman. Have a good night.